Good evening, everyone. I will call to order the Arvada City Council meeting for March 25th, 2024. Tonight is a workshop, and Ms. Rush, if you will do the roll call.
Mayor Simpson?
Here.
Here.
Councilmember Ambrose? Here. Councilmember Davis?
Sorry.
Here.
Councilmember Perret?
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Here.
Councilmember Marriott?
Here.
All right, thank you so much. All present and accounted for. So we have two workshops this evening. The first is on our bond project updates. I would like to invite up Chris Lesberg.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for the opportunity to present this evening with our Q1 updates of our bond projects. I believe this is about the third update that we're providing with the expanded agenda tonight with both 72nd and Ralston Road Phase 2 with the plethora of utilities projects taking place right now. You'll be hearing in a moment from our project managers and program managers on all those projects. But to start off with transportation, we intend to cover the usual suspects when it comes budget, schedule, the phasing, challenges and risks that exist currently, as well as community outreach, comments that we've received, questions we've received from the public and the community lately. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Padmini Gudapudi to go over Ralston Road Phase 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, dear Mayor and all the council members. First, I'll start my Ralston Road Phase 2 update with the budget. This is a very similar slide that I presented last quarter. The only change here is the construction budget increased a little bit with a recently approved change order 5, which is for about a 634 grand. That is what reflecting here. The total current budget of the project is sitting at 25.3 million. Coming to the construction phasing, this project is planned to build in 3 different phases, notice to proceed 1, 2, and 3. The phase 1 mainly focused on utility relocations. All of that utility relocation work is done, and phase 2 and phase 3 focused on mainly underground work and widening on both sides of the Ralston Road. Most of this work is also complete. We opened the traffic, all the travel lanes for the traffic. The remaining item we have on this project is mainly landscaping under some of the streetscape work. That's why you haven't seen this NTP 2 and 3 as a fully complete. Coming to the status and schedule on the project, as I mentioned, the total budget of this project is at $25.3 million, and we spent about 90% of that budget. And the construction budget is about $17.7 million. We spent about 92% of that budget so far. With all the remaining work, we are anticipating to conclude this project early summer. There are landscaping items, some of the punch list items, such as if there are any items that are not meeting the city standards, for example, any roadway work or any items that we see needs to be removed and replaced, or any repair work that needs to be done before we actually take this project into the initial warranty. Next one is the amount of activities or the amount of work or contracted completed in the past couple of months. Due to the weather, I would say the work is a little bit slow. However, they completed a significant of streetscape items during this quarter. The first item that they wanted to finish before we actually move on to the streetscape was stormwater work. That was the only underground work left on this project. So they completed stormwater pipe replacement at Yukon Street and finished up paving at that location. All the manholes right now are raised to the final paving grade, so there are no bumps or you don't feel like you are driving on potholes. The next one is, as I mentioned, due to weather, they're not doing much of a concrete work, but whenever the weather permits, they finished a neighborhood monuments installation, district markers installation, and also pedestrian light pole installation. All of that work is mostly complete. During the night time, if you are actually driving, you can see, except a little bit east of Allison, you can see that ped lights are lit right now. So they're also working on some of the median work. Most of the medians are complete, but there is one median that we are asking them to remove and replace due to some of the quality control issues. As I mentioned, a significant amount of time was spent on the streetscape during the last quarter. I have a few pictures which showcase the installation and after installation of the district markers. So this is one of the district marker in front of a Central Park. You can see the pictures. So the left one is during the installation, how they're actually installing entire district marker on the foundation, and the right side picture shows the after installation how it looks. The second district marker is right in front of Annex building, right next to the City Hall. And the third district marker is at Allison Street, east of Allison. All of these district markers installation is done. The only remaining part is the lettering. So each and every district marker will have inspire, remember, celebrate lettering on the bottom of that district markers where the gray concrete that you're seeing. So that is still pending. That is that work is actually planned in next couple of weeks. Coming to the planned activities for next couple of months, the landscaping work. Right now, our contractor is working on procuring all the trees, plants, and bushes that are planned on this project. Once all of them are ready, they're planning to install, or they're planning to put them in the planting beds sometime in a mid to end of April. The other work is a tree grade work. There are a couple of tree grades which are not installed properly. That work is also going to takes place in the next 2 weeks. And punch list items. Right now, our inspecting team in a different departments is actually working on creating a punch list as means. So everything was installed properly or not. Is there any issues that we are seeing during the construction process? Did contractor actually damage any of our existing infrastructure? All of these items will be listed, and as a punch list items, this will be delivered to the contractor. So once all the final punch list is given to the contractor, their plan is to finish all of them along with the landscaping by I would say early summer. As I mentioned in my last quarter update, all the lanes, travel lanes in both directions are open for traffic. However, to perform the remaining work, our contractor is doing a small single lane closures for a shorter period of time. So if there are any business impacts or access impacts during this small shorter period closures, we are informing the business owners. But these kind of situations are very less in the last quarter. We may see some of them in upcoming few weeks or months for taking care of some of the punch list items. Coming to challenges and risk, I would say the amount of challenges that we faced in the last quarter are significantly less compared to what we have seen in the past year. The reason being, we opened the traffic in all lanes and our business access is improved. We don't have any issues with our business accessing our businesses. So couple of the pictures that I have here is you can see our stormwater pipe is bored through, like the gas line was bored across that stormwater pipe. This is one of the developer's contractor work. So as a part of the punch list, when we were running the camera through our existing infrastructure, we found a couple of issues like this. So we are coordinating with our developer's contractor to repair this and give it back in a manageable way so that we don't have to deal with a damaged pipe or anything like that. The second issue that we faced on the project is theft. You can see on the right picture, stolen tree grade. And we're also seeing some of the stolen ground rods. So I'm not sure what's the reason behind it, but it is only 1 or 2 places. So our contractor is trying to install them in such a way that they're probably they're heavy. It's not easy to actually take them, easy to lift by one person. So they're trying their best to actually keep them in place so that it won't be easily removable. Coming to the community outreach, so since we don't have a lot of road closures on this project right now, what we are doing is on weekly basis, we are communicating with our stakeholders about upcoming project updates or like upcoming any work that is going to impact business owners. Also, we are updating our project website on a weekly or bi-weekly basis about milestones that we achieved, and if there are any work that is going to impact the traffic or that any work that's going to impact the particular businesses. So with respect to community outreach, we are not continuously informing the business owners because there are no continuous road closures. So we did not see any issues with the business owners in the past quarter, but with the upcoming removal and replacement, we may have some access issues, but we are planning to inform the business owners well ahead of time so that they can plan accordingly, and or we can work around their scheduled times. So coming to the completion date, as I mentioned already, we are anticipating our completion of this project with all the punch lists and the remaining landscaping and streetscape work is early summer 2024. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you all have.
Open it to council comments. Councilmember Marriott.
I just have one thing, and I'm sure this is the case, but just want to reinforce it. The picture you showed where they put a gas line through the stormwater pipe, and obviously that'll have to be dug up and corrected. Because this is all brand new and new pavement and all that, let's make sure we hold them to the highest standards of repair there so that we don't have this beautiful brand new road that
This is
has
not,
an issue.
yes, we are doing that. In case if it happens on the road, we have a moratorium period on the road.
Is that spot off the road?
It's off.
Oh,
It's behind
great
the
news.
curve. But we do
Great
have
news.
some issues like that where we are actually working with Ralston Gardens for utility connections. We had to, recently we had to patch one of the recently paved roads. So
Okay.
yes, we are.
Okay, sounds good. And then I have one other thing, and this is really for the city team and the city manager, not so much for you, but I had suggested this back in the fall, that the city, in recognition of the difficulties that businesses along Ralston Road have suffered over the last 3 years, 2+ years, that the city get together a small grant program for each business up and down Ralston Road to take advantage of if they want to and not if they don't want to. And my thoughts on it would be that it ought to be done through AIDA. We've got really good infrastructure to do that. Could be relatively small, $5,000 to $10,000 per business, and should be for exterior improvements only. So nothing else besides that. But it could be landscaping, could be signage, but something that's outside. So my hope would be that these businesses, one, can get a little bit of encouragement to update their look, whether it's just painting the front of the building or some fresh landscaping or whatever, and that if they would choose to do that, we would help them. Or two, that improve their signage or whatever. We've got this nice new corridor, and so I think a very small expenditure of money could both help them who've suffered over this time as well as help the look of it. And so I put that out one time, I want to put it out again and encourage us to try to figure out how to do that. I don't anticipate that it would cost a real lot of money, and I don't anticipate that every business would take advantage of it either. And we don't need to just give them money, but just for a particular purpose, and AIDA could certainly manage it.
We agree that if we do a program like that, it should go through AIDA. We talked about it initially. It has not moved forward, not that it's completely stopped, but there are some issues with going to one business over the other when we've already provided a lot related to lands and a lot of accommodations that were specialized for each business. So this would be on top of that. So it's not as easy and straightforward as you might think.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand. But I still think it would be a good thing to do if we can figure out how to do it.
Okay.
On that same vein,
Apologies, Councilmember Davis had her light on first. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, team, and thank you for this presentation. I can tell you that everyone I speak to is excited about this being completed. And it's not just for the inconvenience, it's also for the convenience of pedestrians. As you see on this picture up here, you have a wonderful pedestrian buffer. That means a lot to everybody, but especially our folks with mobility issues, or they're slower walkers, or they're walkers with dogs. So that is, I just wanted you to know that the feedback I'm getting from people when I'm out and about is that, hallelujah, this is done. And then as a tongue-in-cheek thing, just in terms of working with maybe Visit Arvada, Vail sells their little utility toppers, their little, and they say City of Vail on it. I was just wondering we could do that for Arvada, and those medallions that are in Old Town are really cool. Then maybe that's something that's not going to be brass, but it may be, it's something that we could think about into the future, and we could have those at our tent at festivals and whatnot, and it'd just be something memorable to take home, not only for visitors, but also for residents. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Perfect. Councilmember Ambrose.
Yeah, going back to the earlier topic of Councilmember Marriott to the city, AIDA already has a exterior improvement grant matching program. So are there obstacles, or I guess my suggestion would be, I know that's a matching grant program. Is there ways, and that's due tomorrow if people are applying for that.
And they are qualified. They can apply should they choose to for that matching grant. This was going to be in addition to.
So this, I guess one improvement could be to just add, if you were part of the Ralston Road, that, I don't know. I was just wondering about it because we already have that program in place.
Okay.
I see no other questions or comments from council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Dave Bernard with West 72nd. Start with our phasing diagram here. The thing to note here is we called our phases our CP construction package. Number 1 was the utility relocation, which involves some city utilities, but also all the additional Xcel, Comcast, CenturyLink. And the city portion of that ended back in middle of 2022. But with all the length it takes to get the work done with the other utility companies, we finally just officially really completed CP1 a few weeks ago with some portions outside of from the east side from Kipling to the railroad, and I'll show that later as well. And then with CP2, we are about 95 to 96% done, mainly focused on signs, striping, and the landscaping, of course, that we'll finish here in the spring. We should hopefully have a little bit of paving left, hopefully start planting trees in another couple weeks and those sort of things. And then we go to our construction package 3, which is from Oak East, including the railroad underpass. And this, unfortunately, keeps getting delayed. The process here is we've reached a threshold where we've gotten a 30% approval on our road detour and our track plans for building the underpass. And what that's gotten done is gotten more teams involved on the railroad, and that's so now there's a lot more coordination between these different teams within the railroad to get the detour and the bridge approved before we can even start work. And then the railroad has to do their own work in conjunction with the contractor to get this crossing, the temporary crossing, up and running, and so that we can build the bridge. And so that's that whole process is the approval for that has gotten us a little more delayed, and we're looking at hopefully the beginning of 2025 at this rate. We're continuing to just slog through this long public process that the railroad has when they do changes to their property.
Quickly, Councilmember Foray.
Yes, I'm just wondering if your coordination with the Congresswoman's office has helped. I know we were helping coordinate before with the railroads through them, and did it stop and that's kind of slowing it down? Or
No, we think that kind of got some more attention on the subject, and we started having interaction with the railroad reviewers and their consultants, and we had the site meeting in December with some actual railroad employees that'll be doing the work associated with us. And it's just that process has kind of opened up a lot more and gotten more people involved, more, and that's another route we could look at in the future, is do we have to reach out to the representatives or senators or whoever and get more pressure or more communication at a higher level than what we're doing in the review process right now. And that's, we're waiting on a few questions to be answered on our level at this point before we decide how to elevate that or escalate that, and if that's warranted at this time.
If I could interject here.
Yeah, thank you.
We are in no way where we need to be
Yeah.
with the railroad, and we need to make that. We have some decisions to make, and the team has been tenacious, but I need to be clear, we're not where we need to be, and we will likely need additional support, and we'll let you know what that is. But we need to be moving, and they need to be moving faster.
Thanks.
And I'm a little more, that's the right attitude right there. I'm buried in the process and dealing with the people trying to get this work done, so I have to be a little more friendly and talk with people every day. So that's
You're friendly, Ms. Gillis.
yeah, so that's where I can't lose sight of that. That's a good reminder for me as well in this. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I'm supporting you.
You are, you know, and that's, I'd like to be direct like that, but I can't at this time. So with these current approval delays and such, we're looking at, you know, realistically 2028 to late 2027 where for this project to be fully complete, and that's just, you know, this is a lot more this is a really complex project as far as what we are doing compared to similar projects in the areas that have been done over the years. With our right-of-way, we completed all of our right-of-way agreements earlier this year. We currently have about 3 or 4 residents that we're almost done with their properties, just a few more like springtime sprinkler fixes and things we can't do now. Then we can shift our right-of-way focus gets shifted to the CP3 portion, everything basically east of the railroad, and as well as the greenhouse and Lincoln Academy on the west side. And one of the challenges we see there is that most of these agreements were negotiated back in 2020. So once we reopen this, if you know, we'd like to just kind of use those same agreements, but maybe the residents might have different opinions on what those values in their agreements are for. So we might have to relook at some of those agreements as we begin the CP3 work. Right now, all the agreements are based on the notice to proceed. So it's just like, okay, whenever we get that notice to proceed, which keeps getting pushed off into the future, that's when that agreement would start, but we haven't had to do that now. And along those same lines, there's three properties that we had their easements and agreements started with the CP2 portion that we'll also have to renegotiate more directly because we've done some work on their properties. Now there's going to be this pause, and then we're going to do a lot more work during the CP3. So that's the approach we're thinking about in the right-of-way and temporary easements. So overall, our budget, we are pretty much on track right now. The remaining is that's the original 60 million or so on that left graph. So that's what we have left. We're as far as our staffing, our inspectors and such, we are closing out that contract slowly here. We're at minimal staffing with both. Some of the contractors is down to a reduced crew, and our inspections is down to a reduced crew as well. So we should be okay until the end of CP2 with our current contract, and then we'll have to figure out how we need to staff the gap as well as when we open up CP3 and how long it takes. And then the design, right now, it's still just support on construction questions, and that'll also need to be renegotiated once we have a better idea of how CP3 will proceed. Just showing our original projects here, construction package 1 still has a little money left over in case we have some more difficulties with utilities. And then our construction package 2 is right on schedule. About $1 million of that remaining is the retainage for the project. Once we accept it, we release that 5% of retainage. Just some pictures now. As I mentioned before earlier, we finally got these poles out along the project from Kipling to the railroad. Basically, this is the intersection of Lee where the poles were kind of in the way, and now we have that big clear view of the traffic when we're trying to turn from Lee on the 72nd. And then the same go in the other direction. There used to be all these power poles just to the right of the sidewalk, and those are all gone finally now. So all of our utilities have been moved at this point to make way for the project. This is our new ramp at Pearson Court on the right. This was originally an intersection onto the 72nd Avenue, and we closed this off to allow for the design closed this off to allow the extra lane to be added in the extra bike lane. So now we have a pedestrian ramp here. Pearson is a dead end, and this ramp is almost done. We're waiting on the railing, which has a long lead time for the steel manufacturing. So once the railing's installed here, this will be complete. And just to note, this is one of the more adversely affected areas of the project where the neighbor on the left side of the photo had to rotate his driveway. He now has a Pearson Court address where he originally was on 72nd Avenue, had a driveway directly onto 72nd. We're slowly moving to handing things over from construction to the operations teams for the various subjects. We have street lights now from Route to Swadley, the western end of the project. And thing to note about the street lights is they are powered on their own independent meters, whereas most of the original street lights in the city are owned by Xcel and operated by Xcel. These are independent as part of a program we're taking a look at across the city to see if this is a benefit of having our own lights that we maintain and just pay the electric on them. And then on the right side is the new storm pond at Layden Creek next to the church. What this does, this drains about half of the storm sewer on the site from all the way from the railroad eventually to Layden Creek here behind the church. And this was during the recent snow a week ago, and you can see it's doing its job here. It fills up with the water and lets everything settle out while it without overloading the creek, and it has an outlet there that helps during these flood events, the high rain and snowfall events. As we go to looking to the future here, this is one of the things where now, because we haven't started CP3, we have 2 lanes on Oak that we have to narrow down to 1 lane for the unaltered portion of the road yet. And so now we have to make this right turn lane at Oak and 72nd, and that's it's been handling really well right now. I think I don't see anything outside of normal merging that you would see anywhere else in the city. But we have new signs there. We have different arrows on the traffic signals that eventually will be changed out. This will just be a straight through lane with the option to turn right on Oak. So that's one of the many challenges we have, is now that we have this pause between the 2 phases of what's this transition look like for the next year or so. Upcoming work, talked about signs, we talked about streetlights. We're working on those throughout the whole site. We added a little scope to replace some storm sewer further south on Oak. That'll be done in the next 3 or 4 weeks, hopefully. This picture here is the west end of the project where we couldn't pave it when we paved the rest of the top lift based on the way it was configured at the time for the traffic split. So we're able to get this, the lower lifts of this taken care of in January, and now we hope to pave this when the asphalt plants reopen here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And that'll take care of these little miscellaneous areas that we need to finish at Oak, and then here at Swadley, and then at the Pearson Court dead end that I showed earlier. We should not have any major closures at this point. Everything should be done in single lane closures during the day that get removed every night. But I've said that before, and that's come back at me at other times. So we'll hopefully communicate that and get, as we have in the past. And then, like I said, hopefully early, we're looking at the week of the 15th to get all the paving done. So getting back with the railroad here, this kind of outlines where we are, where we've come so far. And now we have both these two sets of plans kind of getting approved. They're kind of connected, but kind of on approved by different teams and getting that all figured out. And then we have our PUC application, the Public Utilities Committee, Commission, I believe, and then they have to approve the agreement, and that can be a 6-month process. And then we have the C&M agreement, the construction and maintenance agreement between the city and the railroad, and getting that approved and negotiated is also a process that takes quite a bit of time. So those things all have to happen before we can start construction. And then there's another timeline here that shows where we're at this point, showing those different approval levels of the railroad. And the challenges, like we've talked about the railroad enough, supply chain is kind of coming a little easier than it has been in past years, but our steel cost is a big portion of this process, the steel for the bridge. So we're looking at, depending on how the railroad process goes, of getting that procured sometime this year. And then we already know that we're going to exceed budget by about up to $90 million at this point. Or it's a $30 million increase. The total will be $90 million. And so we're working on that as we get closer to the CP3 portion. And on the right, I have the graph of our construction costs indexed by the state, and we can see it's kind of actually gone down in the past quarter. So maybe that's helps the delays out a little bit. And then with our spending, the graph there, it's kind of flattened out because our costs have gone down at this point because of the work is less. And then we have that bump there where the steel procurement is sometime later this year when we go ahead and do that. But then just a steady spending once we start CP3, it should just be a steady rate of getting work done and paying for it. Community feedback. Our biggest thing is we're having a meeting to talk about some of these issues with the public and the delay between CP2 and CP3. That's on April 10th at 5:30 at the church, hosted by the church on 7195 Sim Street, which is the southwest corner. And that's on the website. That's the word we're trying to get that out as much as possible at this point. And then we'll have some posters and such to present to the people and discuss a lot of the where we're at right now. This picture on the right is another transition type of item. We used to have sidewalk here on the northeast corner of Oak, and we just have a temporary pavement right now to get that path with the fencing to kind of delineate it from the road to get for people to be able to walk to the Oak intersection, because there are quite a few people that go that way. We've learned when we had it closed for some of the work in the last few months. A lot of the concerns are just the general construction. That's kind of died down because we have the road open to 4 lanes since January. Potholes are an ongoing thing, and we have the city, when we're paving out there, our contractor is proactive and gets some of the potholes filled in. And then there's also the city comes by on their own rotation, the city streets crew, and fills in the holes as well. We've had some complaints about there's a few properties, including a small development, where we don't have room for left turns now. We've built the medians and closed off their access so they can only go right or westbound from their driveways. And that's caused some concern from some of the residents there. And we're dealing with that at this point. We're probably going to have to put up no U-turn signs and just show people that they have to go into the neighborhood using other ways. It's not as a direct route to get eastbound from those properties, so that's a new challenge that's come up here. And also we do have our 2 schools. We've gotten with the roadway and the sidewalks open. I see people. The sidewalks are busy every time the schools empty out in the afternoon or in the mornings as well when they're going to school. So people are using all the new access points. They're using the crosswalks, and so far it's been real positive to see everything working as it should. And then with Lincoln Academy, there's some of the signing and lighting on Oak has been an issue with them. They do have some lights now, and we should have more lights here in the next few weeks for that area. And then the north entrance is going to be affected by how, when we build the detour road and when we have the new construction for CP3. So I'm in contact with the representative there on usually with any questions that come up on that. So any questions? This is our ramp at Oberon that comes down from the school, and both a stairway and an ADA ramp that will get railing in a few weeks here.
Quickly, Councilmember Mormon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for all your work on this and to the whole team. I know how challenging the project has been and just really appreciate the ongoing efforts that everyone is putting into it. And also to extend again any way that I can help with the railroad and helping reach out to our senators or our Congressman Pedersen. I'd be more than happy to do that again. So please let me know. I'll wait for your direction, Lori, for that.
Thank you, appreciate it. Anything else?
Any others? I see none.
All right.
Thank you so
No.
much.
Turn it over to Mary Stahl with, oh, I forgot the takeaway slide here. What we've already covered everything here. So check out the website for the videos, and if you need pictures or tours or anything, let me know.
Will do. Thank
Now I'll
you.
hand it over to Mary Stahl for the utilities.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And if it helps, we were just at National League of Cities, and there was an entire panel that was very well attended on working with the railroads. Our frustrations are not unique to us.
We'll be able to present in a few more years.
Welcome, Mary.
All right, good evening, council. I am very happy to be here, and tonight we are going to talk about the water projects and the wastewater projects funded by the two bonds. Very excited to share these pictures. The smart meters, that is boxes and boxes of smart meters awaiting installation by city crews. I know we all want that to happen super fast, but we did choose to save money and have city crews do it versus a contractor, and that means city crews have other responsibilities too, so they aren't working on it 8 hours a day like a contractor would. CRT 6, we are under construction. That is Danny Kendricks Park, 69th and Ward, CRT 6, and I think it has one other name because apparently we like to confuse ourselves. Anyway, that is the project. That picture's taken right along the Danny Kendricks Park frontage on 71st Avenue, I think it is. And then the bottom one is the solids ponds out at the treatment plant. Those are moving along on schedule. And I can tell you it's not a very exciting subject to talk about water treatment solids, but the operators are so excited for the new ponds. So this is a slide we show every time, a reminder of the water bond is $50 million. About $20 million is allocated to growth and $30 million is allocated to repair and rehab. Why that's important is how we repay the bond, what parts of the fund it comes out of. And a reminder that we do have very specific projects that we can pay for with the bonds. Gross Reservoir, water lines, smart meters, the work out at Ralston, and a very small portion of the lead and copper rule revision, which is a regulatory requirement. And a reminder that we have quite a bit that is not financed by the bond, including much of the Gross Reservoir payments to Denver Water, the replacement of the Arvada plant, water line rehab beyond this year, much of the smart meter program, growth projects, and then the lead and copper compliance. Wastewater is flipped with 60% being allocated towards growth and 40% allocated towards rates and fees, meaning repair and rehab. The projects identified in the bond language are the North Trunk Line and the Central Ralston Trunk. And what's not financed is all of the work identified in the master plan, rehabilitation of segments that are not identified as capacity limited, and then the work that we do year in and year out, like CIPP and what we call our open cut, which is work on 8 to 15-inch lines. Water projects. As always, what's in bold is what has changed from the last presentation, which was in December, and I want to direct you to the beginning and the end, which is we have spent all the bond money that was allocated for Gross Reservoir. So that is fully spent. And then the bottom one, the smart meters, we have also allocated or spent all the money that was allocated towards smart meters from the bond. Again, the project's not complete. We haven't bought them all yet, but we did spend the $2 million.
The other change we're showing is the Ralston Water Treatment Plant filter rehab project. It may not, but is likely to extend into November. We were thinking we would be done in September, early October. And really what that is when you get into a plant that was originally built in 1962, you find things. They aren't, like, you could use the word exciting or you could use the word not exciting and you want to cry, but you find things. The team is doing a great job working through what they found, but it is extending how long it's taking to us to do one set of filters. And we will not put the next set of filters that need work on them. They do not come out of service till we figure out the set of filters we're on. Good news is we've done 6 filters, so we have plenty of filtering capacity. And then the waterline replacement project, the contract is in place. We are reviewing submittals. The contractor has asked to start work in June rather than the April that we thought. Contractor has great reasons for that. It just pushes it out a couple of months if they don't start till June. The graphs that we've shown before are a reminder that the solid portions of the bar are things that are under contract, with the one on the left being what the bond funding is. The one in the middle is the total need for the bond projects, and the one on the right being the utility need through 2025. Now, that one on the right, we are working through exactly what the budget will be for 25 and 26, so it might shift a little bit. I don't want to say that's rigid, because we are working through rates and fees along with budget. So more to come on that. It'll come out through the budget process. And then the timing of the spending, again, solid is what is under contract. The dashed vertical line is how much is where we are right now and how much we've spent to date, which is about $34 million. The bond rules say we need to spend 85% within 3 years. We are projecting that 85% will be spent probably somewhere before the end of the year. So, and with that, we have a program manager for both Central Ralston Trunk and a program manager for the North Trunk. And the Central Ralston Trunk program manager is here today because I am sure you guys are tired of me talking about sewer. I feel like I've been doing it a lot over the last couple of years. So I'd like to introduce Kelly Bradley.
Thanks, Mary. As Mary mentioned, I'm Kelly Bradley. I'm a utility engineer on Mary's team, one of the program managers for CRT working on the sewer bond projects. So previously, you've seen this slide as 2 separate slides. We were able to consolidate some information and get it all on one slide, similar information just on one slide. So as Mary mentioned, CRT 6 went into construction. We're estimating that to be completed in October of 2024, so that pushed out a little bit just based on the contractor schedule there. CRT 7, we did select a contractor, and we will be coming back for your approval on Monday to be able to move forward with that contract. As you can see, several of the NTL or North Trunk Line projects have pushed out a little bit. That's just due to the extensive coordination that is required on these projects, and I'll get into that a little bit further in a later slide. This slide's similar to the water. It's on the same scale, so it looks a little bit smaller here. We have about, I think it's 10 million that's under contract currently, with a significant amount in the Class 3 estimating range, and we're working on refining the budgets for 2025, so more to come on that.
Before you move on, can you explain what Class 3 and Class 5 is? Because I said last time, let's not put that up on the slide, and because I don't think our public knows what that means.
Yes. So Class 5, it's basically earlier in the design process, so it means plus 100 or minus 50 from the estimated number that we developed. And then Class 3, it's a little bit more narrowed in on the scope, so we have a little bit better idea of what we're going to get ourselves into. I can't remember exact percentages on Class 3.
I think it's 30 and 10, plus 30 and minus 10.
Yep.
But that's from memory, so don't quote me.
Yep.
they're basically ROMs, right? Rough order of magnitude, right? So
Correct.
can we just maybe in future change that?
Yeah.
Because there's no one would know in the public what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So this next slide, again, similar to water, we are expecting to spend 85% of the bond by about Q1, Q2 of 2025. And from the last presentation, you'll just see that NTL and the North Trunk Line that has pushed out some of that spend to later in 2024 and then 2025 as well. But still expecting to spend that $50 million by Q4 2025. This final slide, this is just meant to be a high-level overview of all of the coordination efforts with the various agencies that we're running into on the NTL project. I'm not going to dive into any of them specifically, but more just wanted to provide some perspective of what we're seeing out there and the coordination that's going into each of those projects. And with that, I'll pass it back to Mary.
Thank you, Kelly, and forgive us for doing a Venn diagram, but we are engineers, and so we love them. Just want to point out, we've been talking about NTL 10, that's the Tennyson project, for a long time, and the contractor's ready to go. We are very close to 100% design, and you can see that we have a long, long list of agency stakeholders that we are working through, and that is why we have not actually started construction yet or brought the GMP to you yet. NTL 7, which is the 76th and Sheridan area, also has a long list. And then NTL 2-3 just started design. That is the portion that includes the new Alkire force main, and getting from that force main to roughly the project that we just completed in Mr. Mormon's neighborhood. So this map we've shown before as well. The change on it this time is that the color of the dot for Gross Reservoir has changed to indicate that it is complete. The project itself is not complete, the payments are not complete, but the bond spending is complete. And then our takeaways, these have not changed. Water bond projects are primarily in construction. The sanitary sewer projects should be underway by the end of the first quarter of 2025. Those that are not under contract are rough orders of magnitude and are still in 2022 dollars. And both water and sanitary sewer projects are not the entirety of the projects identified by the master plans. And with that, questions?
I see no lights. All right. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate All right. Is that it for the bond project updates? All right. Thank you so much. Then, all right. Good job, team. Thank you all for your very hard work. We appreciate everything you do in and out every day. So, all right. With that, I will move us on to our next workshop, which is going to be the Housing Strategic Plan update, and I will call forward Carrie Espinoza.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. So the housing team is here this evening to provide an update on the Housing Strategic Plan. And just to provide a little bit of background, the city was awarded a grant from DOLA to hire a consultant to complete the Housing Strategic Plan. This was a grant that we were awarded back in October of 2022. The purpose of this plan is to identify strategies and actions to address our housing needs. The city used that grant to hire Root Policy Research to draft the housing plan, and Root Policy has been working with the Housing Advisory Committee to receive feedback and direction on where to go with the plan. According to the DOLA grant, the housing plan must be completed by June of 2024, so it's coming right up upon us. So we wanted to take this opportunity tonight to introduce you to the work that we've done thus far. We're not completed, but the needs assessment for the strategic plan is in its final form, so we wanted to walk you through that and where we're going with the housing strategies at this point. And We will be back in May to present the final plan to you. And with that, I will introduce you to Molly Fitzpatrick with Root Policy Research.
Thanks, Carrie. Good evening, Council and Mayor. Appreciate the time to be here. I'm bringing my computer up as a cheat sheet in case you ask me really hard questions. I might look at it. We'll see how well I do. But thanks so much for the opportunity. My name is Molly Fitzpatrick. I'm a managing director at Root Policy. We're a Denver-based economic and policy firm. We work almost exclusively on housing studies and strategies for local government. And in fact, we worked with you all on one such study in 2020. And so as we're coming in today, we're not necessarily starting from ground zero. We're building on a lot of the work that we conducted in 2020. But obviously, the market has shifted since then to some extent. And also, you have formed the Housing Advisory Committee. And so as part of that, and with the help of the DOLA grant as well, the city brought us back in to update that needs assessment, as well as work on the housing strategy and action plan. As Carrie mentioned, and as you probably noticed in your packet, there is a fairly complete, it's still a draft technically, we're still making a couple revisions with the advisory committee, fairly complete needs assessment. We're gonna talk through some of those findings tonight, but I'm gonna move through those pretty quickly. That said, I'm happy to come back at the end and answer any questions, or if you wanna dive into any of the details on that, happy to do that. But I'm gonna kind of give a high-level overview on that so that we can spend some time really talking through some of the direction on the strategies to get some of your kind of initial reactions and thoughts on that as well. So with that, we'll dive right into the needs assessment. But before I start with market trends, I'm gonna belabor you with a little bit of jargon. So in the housing world, those of you that are familiar, we use the phrase AMI all the time. We talk about all the things in relation to what we call AMI. That is shorthand for HUD area median income. And the reason we talk about that all the time is because housing programs, both federal, state, and local, all rely on these income limits that HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, produces. They're local estimates, unlike poverty, which is a national measure. AMI is tailored to local jurisdictions and local regions, but it essentially sets the income limits for how we look at program eligibility across different housing programs. And so that becomes important because when we're looking at housing needs, we like to see where those fit in these AMI terms because it helps us understand what strategies and programs to plug into to help solve those housing needs. So it's a little jargony, bear with me a little bit. We'll use those AMI. The traditional breaks or the common breaks for different programs are at 30% AMI, which is, a relatively low portion. AMI being kind of, that's the middle, basically, is when we talk about median, that means the middle. So we're looking at 30% of the middle. So that's kind of the lowest break, and then 50, 80, and 120 are really common breaks, so we talk about those housing programs. Yes?
Just really quickly for the knowledge of our viewers, are these numbers that are going to be listing on the right here, are these Arvada specific?
Yes. And also no. So great question. It's more nuanced than that. So these are the income limits that apply specifically to Arvada. However, because we're talking about program eligibility, they don't actually measure the precise incomes of people living in Arvada. It's set at the county level in terms of what those thresholds are. And so these do represent the income eligibility thresholds for Arvada households, but they also represent that for Jefferson County and the Denver Metro as a whole.
Thank you.
Sure. So jumping into some of the housing market information, broadly speaking, Arvada's a little bit undersupplied in its housing stock. And basically what that means is you have not built housing units as fast as you have added people, households, and jobs over the last 5 and 10 years. And so you're a little bit undersupplied. That makes it a pretty tight market. Your housing stock is predominantly single-family detached. That's not a surprise. That's pretty typical for a more suburban community, but you're even more weighted toward that single-family detached than Jefferson County as a whole and some of those other peer communities within the county. Overall, the building permit trends, which are shown on the bottom there, you have been adding more and more of that, what we call missing middle housing stock. We call it missing middle because it's what's in between single-family detached and a big apartment. So it tends to be townhomes, duplexes, that sort of housing. You're adding that, certainly, but it still constitutes a pretty small share of home sales and your housing stock overall. Market trends, not surprisingly, are pointing toward higher rents and higher prices. These graphics show a shift in the distribution of rents and sale prices in the city of Arvada over the last 10 years. So you can see it for 2013, 17, and 2021. Clearly, you see big shifts upwards, so into those higher rental price categories as well as those higher price points. Those increases far outpace inflation, so we're not just measuring sort of a natural increase in those prices. We're looking at really steep increases across the board. 56% increase in median rent since 2013, and then right now the median price, sale price in Arvada is about $600,000, which means you need to be a household that earns about $200,000 in order to afford that house.
Quickly, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. So could we go back 2 slides right now?
Oh, one more? Sure.
So your green is apartment or condo, and I was wondering, can we tease those out? Because condos you can purchase and build wealth, where apartments you don't do that. And I do know that condos you can rent and they're multifamily and that type of thing. I think that's important to make that distinction. And then also with townhomes, this is tricky if a condo is multi-story. Sometimes people think they're living in a townhome. So if we could just maybe put some definitions around those and details, that would be helpful to our audience. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we can add some of that detail. We don't necessarily have that detail on the permit trends, but we can add some additional detail on the housing stock. The way that these are defined right now, just to kind of clarify for folks that are listening and looking at the report, it's determined by how many units are in the structure itself. And so if it's 2 units in a structure, that's whether or not they're side by side or stacked, that's a duplex. If it's fewer than 4 units in a structure, or fewer than 5, we're calling it a duplex, triplex, or townhome. And if it's 5 or more units in that structure, then that qualifies as an apartment or condo. But we can add that detail. So the city of Arvada does have about 1,400 income restricted units, meaning it is an affordable unit based on your income. You have to qualify to live in that property as well. That doesn't satisfy the entire need, certainly, but it is really crucial housing in providing affordable rents to those low and moderate income households. The city also has another 750 units in the pipeline, so you're adding really good inventory in that over the next few years. That's really good. Again, it still doesn't quite satisfy the demand for those, and it's also important to note that when most of these are built through the low-income housing tax credit program, which is a federal tax credit program, that's how most affordable housing gets built in our entire country, and certainly here in Colorado as well. But it's important to note that the income restriction on that does expire. And so as we look at when those are expiring, you have about 400 units where the affordability restriction will expire in the next 10 years. And so we'll come back to that as we talk about strategies related to preservation of those affordable units. One of the key components of our housing needs assessment is to do what we call an affordability gaps analysis. And essentially what this is doing is kind of looking at where there are mismatches in supply and demand of housing by price point and by tenure, so rental versus owner. The really bottom line takeaway of this is that it tells us really where in that income spectrum or that AMI spectrum your housing needs are concentrated. So where are the biggest mismatches between people's affordability level and what housing is provided at that affordability level? And so on the rental side, we see those needs really concentrated below 50% AMI. On that kind of spectrum, again, you've got a shortage of about 2,790 units in that price point. That's for just your existing residents. We're just looking at where things are mismatched for people that already live in Arvada. This is not necessarily looking at how many units do we need to add to accommodate potential workers or another influx. This is just saying where are our current residents mismatched on price points. And so that's concentrated below 50% AMI on the rental side, and it's concentrated between about 50 and 120% AMI on the for sale side.
Perfect. Councilmember Marriott.
Yeah, so I have a question about the slide. You're showing a number of renters who earn less than 50% AMI. Is that defined as a 2-person household with 2 incomes, or is that defined as a 2-person household with 1 income?
It is inclusive of the entire household income. So if it's a 2-person household, it includes both incomes. Or if it's a two-earner household, it includes both incomes. So AMI changes by the household size.
Okay, okay. I guess I'm not quite sure how what was the 50% AMI here in Arvada? What was the income that tickled the 50% AMI?
Yeah, we can scroll back to that. The examples that are shown up here are showing a two-person household income. So at 50% AMI, that would be about $50,000 for a two-person. But when we actually do the analysis, we're accounting for that there are actually different AMIs at different household sizes. So it's more complicated than just a single number, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah, no, I understand it.
But it's inclusive of all earners within that household. It's not an individual income measure.
Right. And does the, if you're using AMI, does it make an assumption of how much an earner in a household works? In other words, does it consider a full-time worker and a part-time worker the same?
It is based on the income that household reports for the previous year.
So regardless of whether they worked a lot to get it or a little to get it, it doesn't make any difference.
Correct.
There. Okay.
Correct.
All right. So let me ask you, you can go forward back to your other slide. Let me ask you this right there. So it strikes me as, there's this industry built around subsidizing housing these days. And as every industry would do, you try to make your industry bigger and more important at every turn. So you want to capture as many people as possible who fall into these affordability gaps, because that's how you make your case. But it strikes me as in the real world, there are people who may have temporary need for they may fall into this 50% AMI, but only very temporarily for one reason or another, for many, many different reasons. So how does this assessment account for those who may be only temporarily, very temporarily, in this affordability gap? Because I don't see anything anywhere in there that takes any of that into account.
Sure. So the affordability gap, yes, it's a point-in-time measure of how many people and how many units you have in those price points right now. We look at that over time to see if that's growing or diminishing, which would capture, do you have more people moving out of those income brackets versus moving into those income brackets? Certainly, this does not mean that if you provide housing for someone who is earning 50% AMI today, that they would live in that unit forever, even if they start earning more. There's always going to be a natural flow in and out of those units, even if the unit has a subsidy attached to it.
But don't most of these, particularly LIHTC projects and most of these subsidized projects, they don't have any requirement that people leave when they become, you get a raise at work, the operator doesn't even know. How would they know? Or you get a boyfriend and now they're a two-person household. The operator wouldn't know. And nor does the operator ever say, okay, you just got a raise at work, you now make too much, you've got to pack your stuff and go because somebody else needs this place.
No, the income qualify annually. So the operator does know there are annual reporting requirements. The tenant is required to report any changes in income. And no, they don't get kicked out right away, but there is an annual income certification. So there is a protection for exactly what you're saying within those programs.
But what happens when someone does become more economically successful and leave one of these spots? They may have to pay a bigger portion of their own rent, but they're not ever made to leave unless they want to, freeing that up for somebody else. Am I correct about that?
No, they're not allowed to continue to occupy the unit long-term if they no longer meet that income requirement.
So how often are they made to leave? Because that's exactly the opposite of what Foothills Regional Housing says.
It depends. So Foothills manages a wide range of properties. They often have properties that have such a blend of incomes that if someone starts earning from 50% AMI, maybe they start earning 80% AMI. Foothills has enough units that they can shift those around and say, okay, you're now one of our 80% AMI units, and we can also open up this other. So if they have a big enough portfolio and if they still meet some income qualification, then yes, they can kind of float, they call it floating those units to a different income or program category. They're trying not to throw people out into the, into the market if they can still qualify for a certain income program. But no, it's not typical that you would make more earn more, not qualify for that unit anymore, and then be able to stay in that program. So a lot of times in like, for example, a mixed income property, so sometimes you'll have a building that has some market rate and some affordable units. If an occupant of one of the affordable units starts earning more, then they have to satisfy that requirement with a different unit.
Just raise their rent and then lower somebody else's, or lower the next one that becomes available.
Right.
Right, okay, thank you.
So, I mean, there's different programmatic elements to that and different kind of
Okay.
phases.
But this assessment doesn't really do anything to take into account, like this, I see there a number, 4,606 people at this point in time are earning here. We don't know how many of those 4,606 people are temporarily there.
Right. We don't know. We don't track those individuals. Like, so is that the same 4,000 people that were there 2 years ago? But we do look at how that proportion and how that number of renters changes over time.
Right.
So how many renters you have at 50% AMI over time, but not which individuals are moving in and out of that category.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So we also conducted a good bit of consultation as part of this project, both stakeholder consultation through focus groups and interviews, and also a large resident and in-commuter survey. This is a high-level summary of this. There's a lot of detail in the needs assessment, so you can dig in more if you want to. But just to kind of summarize what we heard, when we talked to social service providers, they were really emphasizing the need for long-term programming to support low-income families and residents experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Employers were really vocal about losing workers and their challenges in both recruiting and retaining folks who couldn't find housing that was affordable either to purchase or to rent. We also talked to lots of real estate developers, so folks building single-family homes, multifamily homes, affordable and market rate development in Arvada or had looked at Arvada to do that. They highlighted quite a few policy and process barriers. They also had a lot of good things to say about the city too, but they did highlight some specific elements where we can look at maybe some ways to streamline or make development more efficient in a way that it could help the market deliver the types of units that are in demand from your residents as well. And the community advocates in general were really complimentary of leadership and of city council in particular, saying, look, we think there's great leadership on this issue in council. However, we did hear from advocates that they would like to see more administrative inputs when making land use decisions instead of kind of case-by-case decision-making as well. That's kind of a high-level view of the stakeholder consultation. On the survey, we did have an online survey that was available in both English and Spanish. We got about 1,000 responses to that survey. This is just a really small snippet of kind of what we heard from folks, but broadly we heard that residents really value housing that serves a broad range and a diversity of residents. The most important housing that residents said they cared about for having in Arvada was for middle-class families, starter homes for first-time homebuyers, accessible housing for folks that are losing mobility, as well as housing that's affordable to residents on fixed incomes. So they rated those really highly, but then we're less excited to have the housing types or housing structure forms that typically accommodate some of those price points in their neighborhood. So broadly speaking, they said, yes, Arvada should have a lot of these housing types, duplexes, townhomes, and small apartment buildings, but owners in particular were reluctant to have those in their neighborhood. Renters, very comfortable having those in their neighborhood as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Ambrose.
Okay.
Yeah, regarding the previous slide, could you give me an example for when community advocates say that they want more administrative input into land use decisions instead of case by case?
Yes. So essentially that means they would like for when land use is in line with a comprehensive plan or the base level zoning, that would be an administrative review so that it doesn't get slowed down by additional process. So one example would be in your mixed use districts right now, anything that has residential attached has to go through a conditional use permit as opposed to being administratively approved. That adds a good bit of time to the review process and it adds uncertainty for developers because they feel like they're entering a negotiation process. And so advocates are saying, look, if this makes sense for what our community wants, let's just let it happen instead of putting it through a process that requires more conversation, negotiation, and uncertainty and time for developers. Does that make sense? So one other component of the survey that I just wanted to highlight was that residents did express really strong support for public investment in housing, particularly for low and middle wage workers. So when we asked existing residents what types of housing programs should the city invest in, we had about 60% say ensuring middle and low wage workers can live here. 58% said programs to help low and middle incomes transition to homeownership, and then about half said programs to mitigate risk of homelessness. So we do see support for investing in those types of programs with kind of that priority level among residents. So as a really high-level summary, in 2020, you can see kind of the top 3 housing needs that we identified. Affordable rentals, focused on those households earning less than $35,000, starter homes priced near and below $300,000, and then increased diversity in housing stock. Those are all still true in 2024, with some slight nuance changes and some additional needs. So that rental affordability gap did go up from about 2,300 unit shortage to about 2,800 unit shortage. The price point need on starter and family homes is up a little bit higher. That's partly because interest rates are making it harder to purchase homes, and the market has shifted further away from those more affordable price points. We see in the survey analysis that there's still a need for more types of housing to accommodate kind of a wider range of preferences and incomes as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Ambrose.
How many people took this survey?
Almost 1,000. I think it was 970. Yep. It's in the report, the exact number, but I think that's close.
Councilmember Marriott.
Go back one. One of the things you say there, it started off in 2020 needing starter homes near or below 300,000, and now, the same need exists. It doesn't look to me like there's starter homes for $300,000 anywhere in the Front Range of Colorado or maybe even the world. What's the balance there of a house can only be delivered so cheaply, given the costs associated, and particularly, we take action every year, several small actions over and over and over again that make things more expensive. As each year marches on, we continue to do that with building codes and environmental regulations, and our fire department does it, and development standards, and one thing after another. Have you looked at what is the least expensive, particularly like in our community or the west side of Jefferson County? If a developer said, I'm going to go buy land and I'm going to make no money, but I'm going to deliver single-family starter homes to the market, what would be the target? What would be the cheapest that can actually be done, where they follow all the environmental regulations and follow all the building codes and do what everybody wants, forces them to do, given the price of land, price of materials, price of labor, price of money, to be able to do that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. Yes, it's very expensive to build right now in Colorado, and a lot of that is completely out of your control. So, we are seeing that even when you have kind of a nonprofit developer trying to do something like this, so we're looking at very low margins or no margins, it takes closer to $400,000 typically to build a home, or at least a single-family detached home. However, there are some builders out there that are doing it for $300,000 and less, but they're doing that with modular construction. They need smaller lot sizes. They need utility accommodations often as well. And so there are some things that you can do on the public sector side to help kind of nudge the market in that direction, or at least accommodate some of those. We also see that as we looked at price points for different products, even in Arvada, your median price point for a condo, for example, is pretty close to $300,000. However, there's very, very few condos, right? And so, and some of that state issue that we got to deal with construction defects. So the reality is, yes, you're not going to have a bunch of builders coming in and be like, great, we want to build $300,000 homes, but there are some things that you can do to help move the market that direction.
Well, I guess my point is, I wasn't asking, are there builders wanting to do that? I'm just saying there ought to be a benchmark of,
sure,
it's completely unrealistic to have a conversation about starter homes at $300,000, because there is no such thing unless they're subsidized, and then you can have, conversations about subsidized housing. But, things like utility accommodations or allowing, smaller lots or, different development standards, those are still subsidies. They're just soft subsidies as opposed to direct cash subsidies. And to me, the question comes down to, given our current environment, just where we are, what would be the benchmark, and not even a nonprofit developer, because nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity, their executives make a bunch of money. They're really well compensated. Now, the company doesn't make profit for shareholders, but there's a bunch of overhead in those houses. My point is just you get to, unless you have a benchmark to say, look, it doesn't make any sense to talk about, because we can wish all day long that young families can go buy a house for $200,000 when it's completely not possible. It just doesn't make any sense to have that conversation. So I was looking more for that benchmark, given our current just status quo. What is that benchmark?
Sure. Yeah, I think I understand the question. It's just hard to answer. I mean, Oakwood Homes, who is a for-profit developer, is building modular homes, market rate without a subsidy, that are priced at about $340,000 to $350,000 right now, but they need small lot sizes,
Where?
right? They're in Northeast Denver, in sort of the Green Valley Ranch and Gateway neighborhoods. They're also looking at Arvada property. So, but that is, that's a modular project. So there are some that are doing it. A more typical, traditional builder is not hitting that benchmark. And so there's not a single benchmark. But yes, you're right. And this is really designed to say, here's where the need is. That doesn't mean you're going to meet that need, right? Or that you're going to say, hey, we as a community want to invest in this or want to create that. But that's where the need is based on the market analytics of incomes that can historically buy a home and what is currently available.
Okay.
Quickly, Councilmember Marriott, to her point, I actually took the Oakwood tour only about a month ago now. It was absolutely fascinating watching their processes. And then we went and toured some of the townhomes, and they were identical to the townhome I built in, which was built in the traditional fashion. I wouldn't have been able to tell a difference at all. So it's come a long way, I will say. Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Well, and Fading West is doing that as well. I think they came down here and talked, but I know we use them at CDOT. So I have a couple comments before you go into your next section.
Sure.
So I want to hit a few things. One, on the housing supply, I think what we need to consider is what the state demographer is saying about our change. There's a lot of people leaving the state right now. So I think when you go through this analysis, we should have a forward-looking, not a point in time, because I think it's misleading to think of the missing middle or more apartments or anything like that, because the demographer is saying we're going to have way too many apartments because the people that are leaving the state are 18 to 30, which would be a typical apartment renter demographic. And so she has been warning people to watch that. So, and she shows where they're migrating out of, right? They're leaving here and going. And then you have the older group is leaving to all the states around Colorado. Now, that could be played because of cost of living. You can sell high, live at a lower cheap at the surrounding states. But there is a big shift right now. And Jefferson County is the fastest declining county in the state right now. We are the oldest county in the age of our population. So I think those important influences need to be applied to your analysis.
Sure.
So I don't want it to be misleading this council to think, oh, we better run out and do this missing middle, or we need more apartments, or we need to be really thoughtful on what the trajectory is of our demographics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, we do look at some of the county level projections. So the state demographer, Jeffco did lose folks in 2020. It started to bounce back up, and the demographer is still projecting a net increase in population for both Jefferson County and Boulder County, as well as Adams County. So even though the state demographer is saying, yes, there is this demographic at 18 to 30 that's leaving, when I've heard her presentations, it's more often that they are leaving and going to more affordable markets. And she's still projecting a net increase in population over the next 10, 20, and 30 years. Now, that may not happen, certainly. There's lots of shocks, right? Economic shocks that we can't anticipate. And so, but we are trying to build that in. That is one of the reasons that in that affordability gaps analysis, we're just looking at where's the mismatch of your current residents, of your existing households, as opposed to kind of that forecast. We can add in some forecast as well, but right now the state forecasts are showing a net increase. And so that's kind of all we have to work with on that front. That said, that's why you want to take a look at this every few years to see if those trends are shifting.
Okay, she says something different in the last 60 days, just so you know.
I believe you. That's just not what I heard
I've seen her
say.
presentation twice, and that doesn't align with it, but the recent one. So we would just make sure we get whatever our most recent projections are.
Sure.
The other thing with affordability that doesn't mention, we need to consider this, is when you encourage, more townhouses or apartments or anything with an HOA, and I'll bring this up again, with the lack of maintenance and the issues around of purchasing on a property that has HOA problems, it's a cash-only transaction, or you have to put 25% down. That impacts, even if it's affordable, no one has 25% to put down. So when we start talking about these numbers, that's another influencer that should be highlighted. Those are policy decisions that are probably larger than this conversation, but it does impact. You can have the $300,000 house that he's talking about, or the condo, or the townhouse, but you got to put $75,000 down on somebody who doesn't have the money in the first place. They're trying to get into ownership. So there's some flaw in some of that thinking that we need to make sure that is also influencer in your analysis. The other thing is your cost to rent on your market trends. For council, my thought process with this is there was a huge increase, and if you go to the one after it, I think it's the one after it, or the one before it, there is a huge increase on Candelas and Line Rock, which was from 2014-13 to 2019-ish, which unfortunately brought an average household of $660,000 at the time for single-family households. But what bothers me with your graphs is, obviously you see the cost below, and I think that's a wake effect off the houses out in Western Arvada. But what bothers me is we've flooded the market with apartments comparably over the decades, and yet the rent still did not go down or change. So to me, just adding in density doesn't always solve the affordability. And that's always been a flaw in the philosophies. I think that councils have always thought, not just this one, that if we add density, it's a market and we'll solve this problem. No, you're clearly show it does not. And in fact, it did quite opposite, because we're comparable with 13, 16, 18% in the apartment condos, and 449, for the metro, for Jefferson County. I'd say we're in the ballpark, and yet our affordability for those are way out far. So that's more of a thing for council to kind of think about, somewhere I see a flag. I think your next one, affordability, no, I think I'm good with that. The administrative process by the community, I know that Councilmember Ambrose said, I guess it's changed, hasn't it?
No, it's still Ambrose.
Oh, okay.
It's
I was
just
letting
official now.
I'll get there. It's just like Lisa. The administrative be more streamlined. I really would like to know who said that. Not who specifically, but it is very odd that a community advocate would have said that. I could see developers saying that. I can't see community advocates. So I'm going to put a grain of salt on that, because I think quite opposite. I think that I'm concerned that maybe too much administrative is there right now, and the voice of our residents have been muted a little bit. And the real estate developers, I want to make another clear statement on this as well. The conditional use permit for mixed zones is intentional. We purposely put that there as this council. We understand it adds more. I would not advocate changing that one bit, because what we started discovering was, we say we want mixed use here, and then what they do is, it's called, what's that apartment place across from Kohl's on 64th? West something? Westtown is the poster child of why we do not allow things to go administrative anymore, because I swear that's probably in violation of our agreement there. But basically what they do is they say, well, we'll put in 2 little shops, and then we do 5,000 apartments, and that's not what a mixed use should look like. So I just want to put on the record that requirement is intentional by council to put that there. And I know that's just feedback that you're getting, but I want the public to know that it was intentional. I think that's all I have for this section. We'll wait till the next section.
That's good.
Thank you. No more lights?
Great. Moving on. So as I mentioned, the housing strategic plan is kind of this next phase. The goal here is to address those housing needs kind of across the entire spectrum that we heard from folks that we talked to, as well as kind of the needs that are identified in that assessment. It is in progress. So we've been working really closely with city staff as well as the Housing Advisory Committee on developing this strategic plan. So this is kind of a look at where we are and hope to get your feedback on some of the preliminary recommendations coming out of that Housing Advisory Committee. So just as kind of a quick overview, there are, a handful of benefits around addressing housing needs, kind of, and we're talking across the entire income spectrum, to have kind of this balanced housing stock that accommodates the life cycle community is what we talk about it as Councilmember Marriott was saying. People don't stay in the same income bracket; they move through them, and so there's kind of different options at different points in that kind of life cycle of housing. Having that diversity tends to support the economy and create the culture of Arvada. You've already codified a pretty clear housing vision in your comprehensive plan, and so we wanted to just recount that. We're using that as a jumping off point for the housing vision in general, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel or restate what your housing vision is. But in the 2014 comprehensive plan, the goals around housing and neighborhood are included here. So that's plan for a range of neighborhoods and accessible housing of different tenure types to accommodate diverse incomes and all ages and abilities. Encourage development of workforce or assisted housing throughout Arvada. Maintain and improve the quality of the existing housing stock in Arvada and revitalize the physical and social fabric of neighborhoods that are in decline. And provide opportunities for special needs and senior housing in Arvada. So that section is already in your comp plan, and we're trying to use that as kind of a launching point for, okay, what do we need to do to help you achieve that based on where the gaps are that we see in achieving that vision based on the needs assessment. The Housing Advisory Committee, along with staff, has come up with the following housing goals that help speak to that or help guide some more specific actions over the next few years. One of these is in compliance with your Prop 123 funding that you're already receiving. So that program requires you to commit to a specific quantifiable goal. That's increase your affordable housing stock by 3% per year. So we wanted to acknowledge that that's already a goal you've opted into. And that's that 3% per year right now is about 139 units annually from the current baseline. But then the Housing Advisory Committee also wanted to acknowledge that's not our only goal. We're not just focused on this sort of capital A affordable housing. We also want to increase the production of housing that expands price point and product diversity in Arvada, including multifamily and missing middle projects that tend to have more attainable price points. As we think about the strategic plan, we want to focus obviously on what's in control of the public sector. Where is your sphere of influence? As we talked about, there's lots of things you can't control, like interest rates and commodities pricing, wages, in-migration or out-migration, to the councilman's point. The second, vacation ownership and out-of-state ownership, those are really Colorado-wide issues. They're less of a concern in Arvada as they are in some of our mountain communities as well. And then NIMBYism, which was just how we sort of talk about where is their neighborhood opposition. That's not something that you're going to change in one direction or the other. It's an acknowledgement of where your community is. Within your control, however, is funding prioritization and allocation, producing publicly assisted housing units, zoning consistent with housing needs as well as the market demand, and balancing employment growth with housing growth, and mitigating discriminatory activity, so compliance with fair housing laws. As we talk more...
Sorry, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Outside of and within control, have we given transportation a look along with this housing?
So yes and no. We have talked with the Housing Advisory Committee about strategic investments in terms of like density and housing investments in its proximity to transit. But this really is just focused on kind of the housing specific. Certainly transit plays a role in where different housing makes sense and where you might want to prioritize investments or otherwise in the strategies. So as we talked with staff and the Housing Advisory Committee, we really wanted to kind of focus in on the two key policy levers that Arvada has at its disposal to help address housing needs across that income spectrum. And those are really financial assets, so money and land is kind of typically how that's represented. So those financial assets to subsidize housing, affordable housing production, preservation, and programs. And then you also have land use and zoning tools, which tend to unlock supply, improve natural affordability, and incentivize affordable and attainable projects. So you kind of see the housing spectrum. Again, we're back to that AMI terminology, sort of looking at below 30% AMI all the way up to kind of 80% AMI and above, 50% AMI and above, and kind of the types of housing that are typical within those AMI ranges. And at the lower end, the deepest AMIs there, you almost always need public assistance or public subsidy to support the production of those housing types. As we move higher up across the income spectrum, certainly we expect the market to take over at some point. And there's kind of this mid-range where you can really leverage the market as a partner, but you can kind of guide where or create opportunities for the market to solve your need with land use and zoning that accommodates different types of housing. And so as we look at those two policy levers, financial assets and land use and zoning, those are two things within your control that help you kind of balance together where you want to impact the housing spectrum along this continuum, and using those tools in conjunction so that they are working together, not working against each other. So for example, if you have really restrictive zoning in a community, then if you want affordable housing, you may have to subsidize even more, right? So if you can kind of balance those or make sure they're working together, then that can be the most efficient way to help address housing needs. Before we jump into the actual recommended or preliminary recommendations around these, I want to provide a couple of context slides. I don't want to go too deep into context, but just as a refresh, I wanted to remind folks of the 2020 housing strategy and what progress has been made on that, where there's still some outstanding things that we'll probably roll right into the next strategic plan. Again, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to kind of keep everything up to date with market and current needs. So in 2020, this outlines some of the detailed strategies. I'm not going to go through all of them, but number one of the strategies was to establish a committee to implement the city's housing plan. You did that with the Housing Advisory Committee, so that's good. The second was incorporate additional development incentives to the city's land use code. At the time, the city was working on the land use code, and so some of those incentives did get incorporated. We've worked with planning and also talking to developers. We feel like there's probably still some room to add a few more incentives that might make the affordable development more efficient. The third one was allocate publicly owned land. You have identified some sites and are actively meeting with partners, so that one's kind of in progress. We think it makes sense to keep that one on the list as well. Fourth was to implement a foreclosure and eviction program. That did occur through Jefferson County, but was funded primarily with kind of pandemic dollars, and so there's not current funding for that, but it was functional over the last few years. The fifth strategy in 2020 was to establish a local funding source, prioritizing commercial and residential linkage fees. That was really identified then as a long-term strategy, so it is not at implementation yet. It's something we're discussing with the HAC still as well, and I'll get to that when we get to the preliminary recs. And then sixth was to leverage existing resources and to facilitate affordable housing development. The city has made a lot of progress on this with the HAC really establishing procedures and priorities for the housing fund and making sure that those are being utilized in the most efficient way possible.
Perfect. Councilmember Ambrose.
Sorry, there was just some questions that I didn't see in the analysis that I was wondering if you had gotten information on it, but it's just not in the presentation tonight, of like how many landlords in Arvada are currently using AI with things like RealPage to set renting prices. Do we know how a percentage of how many people are doing that in Arvada?
We don't. Those, it's a great question. Those are basically impossible data to get. We know that that's a concern among a lot of renters, but there's not great data on how many landlords are doing that.
And do we know how many like statistics about the landlords themselves, like how many are out of state, how much property they have, their profit, if they're public or private?
No, there's not great data on that as well, unless a community has like a rental registry program. There's just not a very clear way to identify that type of rental ownership. And certainly like their profits are not public or anything like that, so there's no data on that either.
I mean, if they have shareholders, it is public.
Sure. Yeah, if it's a corporation, yeah.
Right. And But do we have how many short-term rentals that are the entire property sort of short-term rentals in Arvada? Do we know that?
So we do have data on short-term rentals that there is a portion of the report that is that looks at that, but we can talk about if you've got specific questions or something like that. I'd be happy.
I just wanted to know
communicate offline,
how
too.
many and if it's significant to.
So I'd have to look back and see how many there actually are. We usually look at the number and then also the proportion of your housing stock that are short-term rentals, and we kind of gauge it by that. My recollection of that part of our analysis was that it was not at the magnitude that presented a level of concern for us in terms of really impacting your overall housing market.
So it's not exerting any pressure on the current housing supply.
That is my recollection. I'll double check the numbers in that, but yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So that's kind of the 2020 strategy and action steps and where we've come on that. That provides some context for as we look forward. And then there's one other kind of piece of context that I wanted to pull in, and that is really tying in a lot of collaborative efforts that have been happening in Jefferson County, specifically around land use and zoning, and some best practices that reflect national best practices, but tailored to Jefferson County. And that is through the Colorado Gives Foundation convened a Jeffco Housing Advisory Steering Committee, Housing Advocacy Steering Committee a couple years ago, and that has really pulled together a lot of stakeholders within Jefferson County as well as a handful of mayors, and so including your mayor and your former mayor as well have been participating in that. So lots of really good collaboration going on. That task force has really been focused on a specific section or segment of the housing continuum, really focusing on workforce housing, which that project is defined as kind of 60% AMI up to 120% AMI. The benefit of having that group already in place is that they already did a lot of work around a policy platform for Jefferson County communities that looks at land use and zoning. So one of their policy areas was land use and zoning. And so we want to just highlight their findings and their recommendations so that we're, again, not reinventing the wheel, but looking at what do other Jeffco communities and the county as a whole say, look, we think this works in Jeffco, this is where we should be going. So we wanted to pull those in. This shows you their entire list of land use and zoning reform recommendations. They had a subset that say, hey, we think everybody should be doing this. And then they have another set that says, we think some communities should probably do this also. On the kind of everybody should do this is allow accessory dwelling units. You guys already do that. They discourage growth limits. That one's crossed out because the state said last year after this came out, you can't do that anyway. So that's not a problem either. The other two on kind of everybody should do this are zone more land for multifamily and create opportunity for modular solutions. The handful of suggestions as well for some communities, and that's depending on local context, are allow more types of housing in single family zones, particularly duplexes, allow medium density housing, so 10 dwelling units per acre in 10% of the land area, just as a benchmark. Administrative approvals of small multifamily or affordable, lower minimum lot size, increased lot coverage, allow conversion of commercial and office to multifamily as appropriate, and higher occupancy in each unit. So that is also context. We did take a look kind of individually at some of those recommendations along with the Housing Advisory Committee to say what makes sense for Arvada, what is Arvada already doing, and we kind of check off the list. And so you'll see those kind of rolled into some of our recommendations as we get to those in the next couple slides. So finally, moving into our actually preliminary strategy recommendations, and these are organized around those policy levers that we talked about. Kind of, we've got assets, we can throw some money at stuff if we want to, and we can do land use and zoning as well. So under the first policy lever, leveraging financial assets to support affordable housing, our recommendations or the recommendations that we developed with staff and the Housing Advisory Committee are to continue your existing program funding, so do what you're already doing with federal and state dollars. Continue to allocate publicly owned land for affordable and mixed use housing. You're already doing that to some extent, so we want to stay active on that front as well. The third one is to evaluate options for a dedicated sustainable revenue source to support the underfunded Arvada Affordable Housing Fund. You have an affordable housing fund. It doesn't have any money going into it. It's kind of a revolving fund, so it's managing the dollars that you already have and doing that in an effective and sustainable way, but you don't have any inflow to that. And so if you want to address additional housing needs, you'd need additional funding.
Additional funding source was also a recommendation in the 2020 housing strategy. That in that study, the priority at the time was to look at an additional funding source specifically for linkage fee options, basically an impact fee for affordable housing. The Housing Advisory Committee would like to just take a broader look and say, what really makes sense? Is that really is that the funding source that makes sense? Should we look at a more community-wide tax option, for example, or other funding options as well? So we've kind of broadened that to just evaluate options within that. And then the last two recommendations are about kind of the investment of those assets. And one is invest in the production of income-restricted housing, prioritizing projects that meet the identified housing needs, and then invest in the preservation of affordable housing, prioritizing properties that have expiring affordability contracts.
Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. This is great stuff, and the Housing Advisory Committee has done a lot of great work. But two things that in our survey, our citizen survey, that are of concern to me that I hear all the time is we're going to put in all this housing, traffic, and water. And I'm an infrastructure wonk, so it's a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are two things that I would like the Housing Advisory Committee to maybe work with staff on evaluating. If we put in 154 units of affordable housing, what is the load on the city going to be? That is something that concerns me. If it's not close to transportation, or just recently, because of the pandemic, RTD has pulled back on its routes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're building places that are in open areas as well as infill areas without transit, that means we're going to have more traffic, which means in front of a house, you might have 4 cars and with no driveways because you're on smaller lots. So those are the kinds of things that I think need to be evaluated. And I'm a visual learner, so pictures being drawn of how is this going to look?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep, great point.
Thank you. Councilmember Foray.
Yes, I just wanted on point C during the Housing Advisory Committee, we talked a little bit about what kind of options around revenue sources, and two that stood out to me that I found particularly interesting was a ballot initiative around workforce housing funds, or just a ballot initiative for affordable housing, but we thought there might be more of an appetite if it was for a workforce housing fund. And the other was around Airbnb fees, annual renewals. So those are just 2 points on point C around how can we add some additional revenue that comes in on an annual basis. So I just wanted to point that out first.
Thank you. Councilmember Marriott.
Yeah, so one thing I see that I think is deficient or missing from this list is, when you talk about the average rental unit in Arvada, whether it be a house or an apartment, means half of them are above that and half of them are below that. And the ones that are below that, you might call it naturally occurring affordable housing. And there's nothing on all these strategy recommendations that address anything at all about trying to protect that or encourage that to continue or make it possible for those things to continue. And I'll bring up a big one that's happening right now. Some of the older apartment buildings in Arvada are now being required by the fire department to do very expensive alarm upgrades that require cutting into walls and buildings, which trigger in all kinds of asbestos remediation and construction. And what seems like on the outside a small thing turns into a very big thing that then raises the cost of those, and there goes that naturally affordable housing. And here's a strategy that doesn't have anything at all about anything with that. But yet, I submit to you that's probably far more units than all the subsidized housing put together is kind of naturally occurring housing that's affordable to the community. Should there be something there to address that, to make it possible for someone who owns a rental house to continue to rent it for what might be less than the market?
Sure, and the investment and preservation is designed to kind of capture that, but the Housing Advisory Committee and staff felt like the priority within that preservation strategy should be on those units that already have an affordable covenant. That said, we can certainly broaden that to say, look, we want to protect the existing naturally occurring affordable housing. There are different strategies for that, right? So there's fewer city levers to pull on that unless you're putting money into those, except on something like the fire mitigation if you want to provide a waiver or something like that. I mean, that would be working with the fire district on something like that. So we can certainly kind of broaden this preservation strategy to be one that also preserves naturally occurring affordable housing.
Yeah.
And then you'll see in the land use as well is designed to ensure that the market can continue to create housing that will be more naturally affordable than otherwise. But to your point, I think on that preservation, we can just broaden this one to make sure that that's included.
Right, yeah, because as I read that, this is just prioritizing properties that have their restriction expiring and, renew them. And I think that's a good goal. That should be done. But that's only a little piece of it. And not only should there be a goal around preserving the naturally occurring affordable housing, but there ought to be some goals of how to do that. How do you protect that? How do you, what do you do, how do you encourage a landlord to continue doing what they're doing? And it's, taxing them higher doesn't do it, anything you do that raises their costs, they don't pay it, the tenants pay it. So, okay.
Yep. Thank you. So moving to kind of that second policy lever. So the first one was about financial assets. The second policy lever is land use and zoning. We have kind of two chunks, I guess, if you think about it. This first chunk on the first slide is related to land use and zoning that's specifically tied to providing income restricted units. So additional incentives for kind of capital A affordable or income restricted units. How can we make those projects more efficient and more cost effective? So that's kind of this first set. The next set will be looking at how do we also leverage the market to create the product and price point diversity that residents want and need. So in these affordable incentives, in our conversations with staff and Housing Advisory Committee, these are the ones that kind of rose to the top as ones that should be considered. We're not saying, hey, if you like this, you have to adopt these by any stretch. The actual implementation of these would be really working closely with planning staff and seeing what these look like individually. But as we think about strategies, these are the ones that rose to the surface in terms of ones that should be elevated at least to the level of consideration. And that is create a fast track process for affordable. You already have to do that as part of Prop 123, so that one's kind of an easy check because it's already part of something you've opted into. The next one is your current definition in your code for affordable is defined by the funding source of that affordable, so it's defined specifically as low-income housing tax credit. We'd like to broaden that just so it gives you more flexibility in defining that by if it has an income restriction, not where the money for it came from. Consider deeper parking reductions for affordable multifamily and add a parking reduction option for affordable townhomes. Again, this is just applying to income restricted units, but adjusting the parking standards for those. Fourth is consider administrative approval of affordable residential in those mixed use zones. That doesn't mean you can't say they have to be mixed-use buildings, but allowing affordable to move through that administratively as long as they're meeting certain requirements within that. Considering design incentives for affordable. So we heard from affordable developers that the requirements for balconies as well as covered parking adds quite a bit of cost. And so looking at ways to still keep kind of the spirit of what those regulations are designed to attend, but maybe reduce the construction costs on affordable. And then looking at density bonuses for both multifamily and single-family affordable projects. When we talk about density bonuses, you have a height bonus already for affordable, but measuring that not just by height, but also by dwelling units per acre or lot coverage is also really helpful. It just means they can put more units on a site if the site allows for it, and if it still meets the parking requirements. When we talk about density bonuses for single-family, we're mostly talking about lot size reductions or additional dwelling units per acre. And then on kind of the additional land use and zoning, we recommend considering the JEFCO Housing Advocacy Steering Committee's workforce recommendations. So this goes back to that kind of JEFCO-wide group. And these are the ones that either Arvada doesn't already do. So you already do ADUs. You already have 10% of your housing stock at 10 dwelling units per acre. But these are the ones that you also already have a good a relatively high occupancy relative to some other communities as well. You allow 5 unrelated, which is pretty good. So these are the ones that you don't do right now, or that we think you could do more of. So zone more land for multifamily, allow more types of housing in single-family zones, lower minimum lot size, increase lot coverage, and allow conversion of commercial and office. So that's just kind of populating the things you haven't met yet, or they haven't necessarily looked at in relation to that advisory committee. And then the last 2 are to continue to evaluate the viability and potential impact of affordability requirements in new developments. So that means things like inclusionary zoning and affordable housing linkage fees. That's still kind of in discussion on Housing Advisory Committee, but keeping that in the conversation was recommended. And then monitoring state legislation that may impact land use and zoning. There's a lot of state legislation right now that may relate to land use and zoning requirements of local jurisdictions. And so we're just acknowledging that and saying, yeah, track that, because the state may include changes to that you'd want to incorporate as well.
Councilmember Ambrose.
I was wondering if your recommendations might be an umbrella over specific policy recommendations. For example, did you study municipalities like right of first refusal and how that impacted housing supply and land and things like that?
Yes, so Arvada already includes a right of first refusal when Arvada puts money into a project. So if Arvada contributes dollars to a project, then that comes with a right of first refusal. There's also legislation at the state that would mandate right of first refusal. So that's kind of already embedded, at least in projects with city money. And as we're really kind of using these these are the broad recommendations that would be strategies. And then as we get, continued refinement of these, either from input from you all and from the Housing Advisory Committee, then we'll really start to lay out some more action-oriented steps on specific things to look at within that. And I promise I'm done talking now. So thank you for your patience as we work through it. So.
Thank you so much. That was excellent.
Great.
We really appreciate it.
Great. Any other questions?
Councilmember Marriott.
I've got more thoughts rather than
Great, that's
questions,
perfect.
but feel free to answer any of these. So, when we have these housing discussions, I'm always struck by, we're sitting here talking about housing affordability in Arvada and different schemes to subsidize housing in Arvada and subsidize some one way and some another way and different income levels and all that. But the reality is the housing market's completely regional, and the demand is completely regional as well. None of this is specific to Arvada. And if we do more of it than everybody around us, it'll all get filled up and used up. And if we do less than everybody around us, it'll all still get filled up and used up. So it's very difficult to take an equation and say there are this many Arvadans that are missing adequate housing, and if we could just develop this much of adequate housing, then this many Arvadans would have adequate housing. Because it's not true. The minute you develop that number, the regional demand will fill that up, and you'll be no different than you were before. Now, in a bigger picture, if the region does it, and particularly as trends go, and particularly as Mr. Pfeiffer pointed out, as demographics change, and particularly as the market works, where this very expensive housing market becomes less palatable for people and they leave, and the demand goes down, then the demand will be more easily filled, or will be filled. So I think we need to just take a breath when we do all this stuff and just realize that we're not here solving a problem for a certain number of Arvadans. We're having a regional conversation, but all we're talking about is Arvada, and so it's a little bit of a disconnect there. I did have a question for you, and that's, down at the state, they're talking about ADUs everywhere. So ADUs without restriction. And Arvada has allowed ADUs for quite a long time, I think since 2007, so longer than most communities. We don't do it without restriction. We have some, what to me appear to be very common sense restrictions, like you have to provide a parking space, and the ADU has to be smaller than the main resident, and most importantly, the owner of the property has to live in one or the other, that you can't just convert any property you want to a duplex. But the stuff coming out of the state is very different from that. They're, ADUs everywhere without restrictions. We build very few ADUs every year. I would look to our community development director to give us a nod, but it's a handful, maybe a double handful, but it's not very many. If we took all the restrictions off and just said, ADUs everywhere, you don't have to live in it, no restriction, no parking, does that change how many get built? And if so, it probably would, but if so, by how much?
That's a question I can't answer. It's a great question. I mean, I would say, broadly speaking, when we look at ADUs as a solution, they are a great tool. They are not a silver bullet to the housing, shortage, broadly speaking. So yes, more would probably get built. We can't say how much. They're not cheap to build, right? And the way that they're managed, even from like a water tap perspective, and some of those have a really big impact on how many of those units get built. We do see what's nice about ADUs is it allows you to add housing stock without substantial change to the kind of existing neighborhood or existing footprint. So it's a great infill solution. It's not a silver bullet. It's also not something that's going to, not everybody's going to add one either way.
Yeah, but with the give and take with positives and negatives with every policy, right? So there's, for some people, residents in neighborhoods, there would be a negative if more ADUs were built, and particularly with no restrictions. And there would be a positive, presumably, with there would be more of them built. And so we have to try to evaluate, make that evaluation. Is this worth, harming some people to help some others, essentially, is what it kind of boils down to. And so I'd love to hear in the future more, particularly if there's any data about that, any information or actual data about that, because it seems to be the legislature's really hanging their hat on that. And to me, it always seems like it's a really silly policy to have as the keystone of your housing policy, because our experience here in Arvada has been, some ADUs get built, but it's very few. So it's not very many. A couple other just thoughts. In the recommendations, there's a recommendation to develop funding for a housing fund through a linkage fee or a tax. And I remember talking about this way back, I think with you, when Root made the first recommendation, the first thing, about how I think how dumb a linkage fee is. Because you say we've got a housing affordability problem all up and down the whole spectrum, all the way up to 120 or 150% of AMI. So we're going to fix that by making some housing more expensive so we can make other housing less expensive. And it doesn't seem like to me that fixes anything. So I really would encourage, as we talk about policy, to keep in mind what a terrible policy a linkage fee is, and at least come around to the look of additional sales tax, additional property tax. The voters would have to do it, so at least you're being honest with the voters. If the voters were to say, we agree this is a real problem in our community and we should take action to solve this problem, and we're willing to reach into our own pocketbooks to do it, I think that's an appropriate way to go about it, and more importantly, an honest way to go about it, where when we up here pass a linkage fee or something like that just takes from someone that they kind of don't know. It's a little bit like the Metro District thing, why some people's property taxes are so much more than others. Take from some without their knowledge to give to others kind of doesn't make any sense. The other one that was a policy recommendation in there, I think from the Jeffco group, was allow duplexes everywhere in every single family zoning. If you've driven through Northwest Denver, that policy, I mean, there's some cool stuff there, but boy, did that dramatically change all of those neighborhoods in Northwest Denver, because every single family house could become a duplex. And so as soon as every single family house could become a duplex, lots of single family houses were scraped and duplexes were put up in place. There's a really famous website called Denver Fugly or something, where they make fun endlessly of, these nice turn of the century or 1920s bungalow houses, and then something that's totally out of place sticking up next door, because somebody wanted to maximize just the profit on doing that by tearing down a single family house and building a much bigger duplex in its place. And so when I see a policy recommendation like that, I understand that in a vacuum you look at that and you say, oh, we're trying to increase the supply, here's how we better utilize what we have. But the ramifications of that are just terrible, I think, and potentially terrible. And I think, I think we have places in Arvada, particularly Old Town, but even outside of Old Town, where it would be economically viable to buy a 1950s ranch house like Sharon lives in, tear it down and build a vertically and bigger, more lot coverage and less parking and, you know, all these different strategies, and dramatically change the look and feel of a neighborhood, probably mostly to the detriment of the people who live there. I think most of the people who live there would be not happy with that. So I would encourage, anytime we start thinking or talking about a policy like that, that we talk about it broader than just this focus on how do we make more houses in the same spot.
If I could just
Yeah,
add to
go ahead.
that, we have seen communities acknowledging that and concerned about that, increasing the zoning only if it's a vacant lot or only if it's like a greenfield development to help protect exactly what you're talking about. So to prevent scrapes, or adding demolition protections to try and do that. So just to acknowledge, I agree. I think that's a concern, and that's something that you'd want to build into the policy to make sure that that's in line with what you all want.
Right, okay. And then lastly, I may just have two more quick things here. You know, the one of the other policy recommendations was to essentially allow things we don't allow now. So dramatically change the, you know, whether it's the density of the lot size or the quality of the construction or what exactly is constructed. You know, if you're going to go deliver the cheapest building, it's going to be very geometric, very square, very few features, because that's how you do it the cheapest. And we have a number of things within our land development code that aren't there just as an accident. They're there for a really good reason, because I think people value what this community is like and don't want to see it change. So again, it's another one of those recommendations where I understand the recommendation where you say, well, we should just allow modulars anywhere. But there are places where that's the case, and it's very different than what we have. And as we consider these types of recommendations, we need to, again, consider them broadly, not just for the specific purpose of more housing in the same amount of space, and realize that it comes with a big trade-off in the quality and the look and the feel of the neighborhoods that people are already living in. You know, that it takes something away from somebody when you change their neighborhood to negatively, at least in their perception. You know, it kind of takes something away. So last thing I would say is the two things that really stick out to me is I agree completely with Mr. Pfeiffer on the administrative approvals. You know, as we approved our new land development code recently in the last few years, that was the goal of it. And I think we struck a balance. There was a real good reason why we required a conditional use on first floor residential in mixed-use zoning that could be commercial. And it's because currently the market will build apartments everywhere if you let them. And, you know, as a city, we have to be able to generate and collect sales tax to be able to function. We have to be able to patch the potholes, replace the playgrounds, keep the traffic signals working, everything that we've got to do. And if you foreclose on your ability to collect sales tax, you're not a functional community for the long term. And so we specifically put that in there for a reason. And I would defend that reason as Mr. Pfeiffer would, because there are places where first floor residential doesn't belong. Now they can ask for it and we can give it, but I think it's important that we do that. So I think that's another one of these policy things that I'd be very, very, very careful with. And lastly, I would leave off with my questioning before. You know, within our community, there is lots of people who make, you know, below the AMI who are living well and who like it here. And lots of them live, almost all of them, in fact, in naturally occurring housing that they can afford one way or another. And they find a way, whether they have roommates or whether they're a really good tenant. I know I have a bunch of tenants that are paying way under the market for the places they live in. You know why? Because they're really good tenants, and there's a reward for that. I think anything we can do from a policy perspective to help those situations continue is more impactful than all this other stuff put together. Because I don't think we can ever acquire enough subsidy money from the feds or get enough subsidy locally to be able to move the needle hardly at all. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing that stuff. But when you look at the size of the naturally occurring affordable housing versus what anything that could ever be developed, there's a giant difference, you know. And all of these types of discussions we have are always seem like they focus around subsidizing more new housing, which is the most expensive housing there is. Like, you want the most expensive unit it is, it's whatever the last one that was built. And you can subsidize it down so the end user pays a little less, or it can be market rate so the end user pays more. But that's the most expensive housing in town, and you don't solve a housing affordability problem with the most expensive stuff in town. You solve it other ways. And I would hope that our Housing Advisory Committee would be creative and take a look at some of those things we do, and not just fall into the conventional wisdom of we've just got to figure out how to come up with enough subsidies so that we can build more subsidized stuff, and with no open goal, with no end goal in mind about what how much subsidized housing are we going to have, and where's it going to be, and what's it going to look like. It's just this open-ended goal of more. And I don't think that's the right answer either from a big total picture. I think it's a piece of the picture, but I wouldn't even call it the biggest part of the picture from my perspective. So anyway, that's all I have.
Councilmember Foray.
Just to close out, I'm wondering, of the two kind of bucket recommendations, what top two would you pull from them? I guess specific to Arvada.
I mean, in terms of the biggest recommendations, or the ones that I would say could have the biggest impact, I mean, one would be additional funding stream. So you have great infrastructure built in for how you're managing the pool of resources that you have, and you have great staff that are doing that really well. You don't have any inflow. And I think most strategies, even when we're talking about preserving naturally occurring affordable housing, are going to require some funding. So either that's incentives to landlord to help them rehab, or imposing an income restriction, or buying down those naturally occurring affordable units. There's very little other than land use and zoning tools that you can do to preserve or create housing that doesn't require any funding whatsoever. And so I'd say that's a big impact one. And then kind of on the land use and zoning bucket, I mean, it's hard to kind of pick one. I do think, looking at incentives for affordable or income restricted developments, and so I would say particularly for affordable ownership opportunities, because you don't have any of those right now. So you did do a good job on your code. Your code is in good shape, right? You just went through that. So I think you are allowing the market to do a lot of work for you on the code front. But right now, the only affordability incentives you have in your code are for low-income housing tax credit multifamily projects. And so you think about an organization like Elevation Community Land Trust or Habitat for Humanity, they don't get any incentives unless they come to you and negotiate them on a case-by-case basis. And so building in some incentives or broadening what your incentives apply to within your code, I think would help those kind of the good actors in your market that are already trying to do a lot of that and trying to serve a lot of this. Even Foothills Regional Housing, which is doing a ton of work. There's a lot of great nonprofits active here, but you can do a couple things in your code to make life easier for them, and that's not going to have kind of the sweeping impact on your whole zoning code or some other things that might be a little bit harder for to kind of get through, or that would impact more neighborhoods. So those are probably the two I'd pick. Thanks.
I see no more lights. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the long presentation.
No, it was very comprehensive. We really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, that'll conclude this evening's workshop. So I'll turn it over to the team. Ms. Gillis, do we have any updates?
Nothing for me.
Ms. Morris?
Nothing from me, Your Honor.
All right, we stand adjourned.